Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. At their meeting on March 13th, the Monroe County Commissioners highlighted the significant disconnect between state and local governments. Following a request from County Treasurer Kathy Smith for funding to purchase a scanner and software for her office, Commissioner Jody Madeira emphasized how the state government overlooks the small cumulative costs that local governments face.
It's expenses like these, I think, that the state government just doesn't know exists when it talks about lowering property taxes. And it's either we pay for these services or we waste more dollars. And it's not a waste, but it would be critical. But it would be it's more efficient to do it through mechanical means than paying people to do this work. And it's important work. It needs to be done. And I wish, Jess, that they had some appreciation of the minutia of costs that we have to approve in order to do the business of local government.
Commissioner Julie Thomas added that these small costs accumulate quickly, placing an unforeseen weight on taxpayers. The Bloomington City Council met for a special legislative session on March 12th, where they heard a report on the 2023 community-wide and municipal operations greenhouse gas inventory. The city's Economic and Sustainable Development Department partners with Climate Nav to aid in compiling annual reports of Bloomington's greenhouse gas emissions. Climate Nav's CEO, Wes DeSilvestro, shared a breakdown of the city's primary sources of emissions, highlighting Bloomington's downward trend in emissions since 2008.
The primary driver of the city's emissions going down since 2008 has actually been improvements in decarbonizing grid supply electricity. So the city's utility provider is Duke Energy, and Duke has done a lot of work to decommission coal plants, transition to solar and wind and other sources of energy that are sustainable. And all of that is showing up on this graph here with kind of providing a tailwind to reduce emissions. Now, there are a number of other sectors and subsectors that the city will still have to kind of pay attention to, which we'll talk about today, that are either increasing or staying flat and are so to speak not the low-hanging fruit that have to be decarbonized for the city to reach its climate action goals. Next slide. All right, so this is specifically drilling down into transportation. And what you'll see here is a breakdown of transportation emissions each year by type of vehicle. So we're looking at light duty, medium duty, and heavy duty vehicles using Department of Transportation data from the state. And one thing you'll notice is that it's stayed relatively consistent over this 5-year period. So for the most part, transportation emissions, the main way to reduce them is to electrify vehicles. And the city is still pretty early in the electrification of its vehicle stock, both for municipally the municipal fleet, the Bloomington Transit fleet, which we'll talk about a bit later, as well as just resident-owned vehicles.
Beyond the stationary energy sector, Silvestro also noted that emissions from vehicles have stayed relatively consistent since 2018.
You'll notice it's actually gone up over the last few years, and so we're actually seeing a slight increase in solid waste emissions. This is something I've seen in a lot of other municipalities across the country. Bloomington's not alone in this, but it does point to the importance of things like composting, recycling, diverting waste, and preventing waste in the first place as a way to reduce solid waste-related emissions.
Finally, the third most significant source of emissions, waste disposal, has seen an increase since 2011.
We are talking with Haskell Smith, our urban forester, to develop a new urban forestry study to know how many trees we have in Bloomington. A lot has changed since the last study in 2018, especially with the extreme weather events that we're having because of climate change. Last year we had 200 trees come down. So we need that study to be updated to know how many trees we have in Bloomington and how much carbon is being sequestered.
Overall, in accordance with the Bloomington Climate Action Plan, the city is projected to be on track for their 2030 target of a 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. But complete carbon neutrality by 2050 will require further reductions by 30%. Council member Dave Rollo brought attention to the imported materials that weigh on the carbon budget, asking about other methods of carbon absorption, such as planting or more trees to account for overlooked aspects of emission reduction. Assistant Director of Sustainability, Sean Mia, explained that further study is needed.
for sure, you're definitely going to see for stationary energy, the main driver of those emissions going down is going to be the actual change in Duke's, IRPs, their integrated resource plans, and the amount of actual, where this electricity is generated, right? So then decommissioning a coal plant is going to have a huge effect on reducing emissions. That's not to say, though, that the work the municipality is doing itself with the city of Bloomington, as well as what residents are doing, isn't meaningful. That work we definitely see in the data is decreasing emissions a lot in those areas, and it significantly really matters.
Council President Hopi Stasberg asked to what extent the reduction in carbon output from the stationary energy sector was a result of community-wide efforts and how much was led by municipal reductions. Silvestril said that while Duke Energy's policy direction has made the biggest impact, all efforts have made a difference.
What we were excited about was not the physical building of the convention center, but it was that revitalization of the south side of town, that First Street area south of the square, which really needs some uplift. And we think that anchor there at the convention center is going to revitalize that. We have the Walnut College corridor in the works as well. So I think this is a great opportunity, and we're excited to see what that's going to look like in, say, 5 years.
Later, Director of Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce, Christopher M.G., reaffirmed his excitement for the Monroe County Convention Center expansion and revitalization project.
I think it's important to look at these issues, especially now we're in this time where we don't know fiscally where we're going to be as far as what's going to come in revenue. We have the Senate Bill 1 about property taxes. So this is a time to sort of tighten our belts a little bit and look at some of these things.
The Bloomington City Council will meet again on March 26th. During public comment at the Monroe County Council meeting on March 11th, Seth Muchler urged the council to protect its residents from ICE officers in response to the detainment of Mahmoud Khalil.
This is clean and unambiguous retaliation by the federal government in response to free speech. Now you may ask, why am I bringing up a federal issue that happened in New York State here at Monroe County, Indiana's County Council meeting? I know that you are a county governing body. I know that, to the best of my civics understanding, that one of your primary responsibilities is to serve as the county's fiscal body. But I also know that you are leaders in our community and that your words and actions carry weight. And I ask you to please do anything and everything in your power to protect our community members from ICE and from persecution. I know that Mahmoud's story is very high profile, but that is just sort of the most present in the news and egregious, and there are people who are also being disappeared every day just for existing as people who may have documented or undocumented status. I don't have any immediate concrete actions to recommend in how you protect your constituents from ICE. I trust you all to know best your areas of influence, but this issue is timely and your community is in need of your support. So thank you all so much for your time.
Next, Monroe County Auditor Breanne Gregory announced a new database that will help with the county's financial transparency.
I'm really excited to announce a collaboration between my office, the auditor's office, and the surveyor's office. Dr. John Bayton is the GIS coordinator in the surveyor's office, and he is currently working on building a database that will show all county financial information. So he's working on building it now. It will eventually be public facing and on the county website. And it will show all the budgets. It will show additional appropriations, actual expenditures, revenue, a lot of different things. You'll be able to look at the money that goes to public safety, for example, and we can do a million different things with it. It's just very exciting that we'll be able to provide this level of transparency in the near future.
Later, the council heard a resolution to pause all non-essential activity of the Personnel Administration Committee. County Attorney Molly Turner King presented the resolution.
In essence, what this resolution does is to temporarily suspend consideration of requests for new positions, reclassifications, and or job amendments resulting in an increased cost to Monroe County. The resolution would provide that the Personal Administration Committee or the PAC Committee would not meet or receive requests during this temporary suspension. as the council does not want to expand fiscal obligations during this time of uncertainty. I do think if we received a PAC request that does not result in an increased cost, that we could then advertise or request an emergent or necessary PAC meeting.
The resolution passed unanimously. The council later discussed the status of the pre-design phase for the new Justice Center. Councilmember David Henry underscored a need to address the scale of the jail while understanding that time is not on their side.
There's probably a lot to say, and I don't want to hog the ball, as I'm sure my colleagues have other things I'd like to bring up about the current cost of that was presented to us. I do want to focus on one thing that jumped out at me in the meeting, and I brought up during the meeting that I was very surprised by the sense of place and location of the facility relative to both the county's comprehensive plan of 2012, which calls for a urbanizing of the space around what we call Criderville, as well as the sheer amount of parking that was proposed for the facility. I think the count is now like 750 places, which would basically be one parking space for every employee in the county. I did ask Plan Commission where I might find the next nearest parking lot, and they suggested Walmart or Indiana University in terms of size and concrete. I don't know if those numbers have changed since the presentation, but that alone indicates that there maybe need to be a revisiting of scale and what stakeholder input is. I think I want to leave my second comment on that point. There's obviously listed in there a group of stakeholders that were consulted. Some of them are going to be the daytime occupants of that building, but advocates for the nighttime occupants of that building don't seem to be as well heard in that plan. And I got to say, the other stakeholders, as of course being us, that we do have the power of the purse. We do need to stick with our budget that we've proposed through the bond is really important. The proliferation of costs is only going to go up as the cost of steel, lumber, and other resources go up by the hour, with additional tariffs being proposed in the federal government. And so, I mean, this is the bottom. But I've had calls from everyone from folks that are involved in the economic development of our community to activists that are concerned about the conditions in the current and future jail, saying that a $250 million facility is entirely beyond our risk tolerance in the community. And so while I think we could redline the project, and I've definitely taken an attempt at finding square footage to cut, it's not, I think, on us to do that, but it is on us to go back to the vendor and to the commissioners and say that we've given you what our tolerance is. We know we're out of time. We've also passed resolutions that indicate what we think the size and scope should be, and we need to start back on that point and revisit where we are. Thank you, Madam President.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it is up to us in a way because we are the purse strings. So yeah, we hold that power.
Councilmember Marty Hawk expressed frustration over not knowing exactly what this would cost taxpayers.
We have a lot of properties, Monroe County government, and remember that means the people of this county own a lot of properties, many of which it appears we're going to be moving from to move departments there. I want to know what the plan is in order to no longer be responsible for those properties and to be able to recoup the money in order to buy down this price. I want to know what the plan is for our present justice building. Do they plan to implode it? That's an expensive proposition. Do they plan to sell it off to somebody else? Well, they'll have to take into case how much it costs to implode it if they plan to do something with it. Or is there anything else we could plan to do with it? I have not seen the long-range plan. Folks, if you were going to go out today and look for a house that you really, you would love to have, but you know you've got to sell your house first. And you have to figure out what you're going to get out of your house before you can figure out what you can afford to buy. Wouldn't you already be looking at these things? Maybe you've got two houses, one's around, maybe you're going to sell both of them instead of buy this house you really want, the dream home. You'd be having to figure out what you're going to do with those two houses. I haven't seen that. Now, that doesn't mean there's not a major plan. Maybe the commissioners got this all worked out. They know exactly what they're doing, just haven't bothered to share it with us. But we are the fiscal body, and before we go to the public and say we want your paycheck to cover this, a big chunk of your paycheck to cover this project, we better be knowing that we're doing it in the best interest of the people who live in this county that's going to be paying the bill. And I'd like to see an estimate. If you make 50,000, if you make 100,000, or if you're on the council and you make 20,000, what is this really going to cost? And some examples.
Council President Jennifer Crossley advocated for including a green space at the new facility.
I would like to see that green space kind of come back. I really do. Everybody that is in there deserves to be rehabilitated back into society. And the harm that is being done by folks being in there, now granted, we can argue and go back and forth and say people need to be in there for various reasons, whatever. I'm not here to argue that. But what I am to argue is those that deserve a second chance to be rehabilitated back into society, there are things that can happen, and while they are doing that, I do think that the green space is one thing. We saw presentations about how they were doing that before and how they're doing that now, and I would like to see how they can do that with this next one. That would just be my personal take on that. So that's all I have to say about that, and that's it. Thank you.
The next Monroe County Council meeting will be held on March 25th. The Ellettsville Town Council discussed a new retirement plan option for government workers at its March 10th meeting. Clerk Treasurer Noelle Conyer said she's been researching the Hoosier Start 457 plan as an additional savings option for town employees. The Hoosier Start 457 plan is a traditional retirement plan with no town matching. She says it would be offered to new employees and would not require any ordinance changes.
So it's a cost savings plan. We would keep the nationwide plan for the current employees that wish to keep it. This would be for any employees that wish to change over to this plan. For the first 6 months, there's no administrative cost for it. They waive all of those. So it just gives another flexible tool for the employees for their retirement.
Conyer said new employees would be encouraged to use the Hoosier Start 457 plan, but participation would not be mandatory. The council voted to table discussion on the retirement plan until its next meeting. During council comment, Planning Director Denise Line said that the town received a Community Crossings matching grant for $258,181.63. She said the INDOT grant will be used for town pavement projects.
We're going to pay five segments of Sale Street and West Rosewood Street, South Tulip Tree Court, North Beechwood Drive, South Birch Drive, North Impatient Street, there's 2 sections we're paving, and West Higgins Court.
The total project costs will be around $344,000. The next Ellettsville Town Council meeting will be held on March 24th. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.
for hurting families in Monroe County.
A contribution to children who are vulnerable and in need of an advocate.
A staff that goes above and beyond to support and advocate for children in need of services.
The web of remarkable people who are dealing with difficult situations.
So many young people that are in need of help and trying to find a stable family, a stable place to live. Without the CASAs to make that happen, many of them would be unable to find a good home.
I love being that voice for the child who can't speak for themselves in court.
It takes me out of my comfort zone, and it also helps others.
CASA means supporting our community.
Being a CASA is making sure that your village is healthy and whole, and that the children in your village will someday be able to help the village as well.
A child who doesn't have a voice, maybe in their family situation or a school situation, now has a voice that can advocate for them.
I really enjoy working with children that are going through difficult times and letting them know that I care about their future.
We are privileged with our charge of representing the best interest of children. And so therefore we can advocate for exactly what they need without restriction, focusing on their best interest.
I want to repair the world one child at a time.
All I know about this thing is what it looks like and where I found it. in the spring or early summer of '83. My brother and niece and I were taking
practitioners to expel the waste because in architecture you have volume outside of the body you have in a very short time. It brings in a great amount of energy to a painting. It's on a flat surface, but you have all the same.